Happy Community Day, everybody. We're excited to be with you. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Derek. I'm the director of the Wildlife Encounters Ecology Center and Farm School. Most people just call us Wildlife Encounters. And for those of you who have enjoyed us for several years, coming to the Somersworth Middle School for your Community Day, we are a little bit bummed that we can't see you in person and be there in the auditorium with you. But we're doing the best that we can through our virtual presentations. We've set up a little virtual studio here, and we're excited to be with you. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, Wildlife Encounters is an organization that's been around for about 17 years. We are a community-based educational entity. Our home base and our legacy facility, USDA licensed facility, is in Rochester, New Hampshire. And I'm actually coming to you, if you notice kind of like the old wallpaper, some of you are already probably like, that's kind of ugly. We are actually in an old farmhouse on the 77-acre farm property that we bought in Barrington, New Hampshire, and are developing into an ecology center and farm school. Now, we've certainly seen some challenges, as has everybody watching this year, 2020. What a year with the pandemic and everything else. Of course, we have not been going out to schools all that much or communities. So we've done a couple of things in order to kind of adapt to make sure that we can continue to meet the needs of the animals and service the community the very best we can. The first thing that we're doing, obviously, is doing presentations like this. And we are actually pre-recording this at about 5 o'clock on the Thursday before your actual community day. Another thing that we are doing is we are actually holding events here at our Barrington farm property while we continue to develop it. Those are mostly outside. And something that some of you might actually want to share with your parents, we did something we never expected to do. We actually, with our legacy facility up the road in Rochester from you, we actually kind of did some redesigning and some improvements, and we have actually now the ability to offer what we call a backstage pass tour, where you guys in small, healthy family groups can actually come and visit the animals in their homes. So that's something new. And we hope you guys will share that information with others after our program. And let them know that there's more information on our Facebook page, our Instagram, and obviously our website. So that's just a little bit of stuff that we wanted to get out of the way. We want to let you know that all of the animals, about 80 different species and over 100 beautiful souls, are all doing well. Everybody's healthy, and we're excited to share a few of them with you for Community Day 2020. Now with me, it's kind of like my partner in crime. All right, years ago she started out as a volunteer, and then she worked her way into being an educator and so on. She's just off camera, that's why I'm looking over there. And she's going to be helping me out with some of the animals here as we go. So you want to come say hi?
I do want to come and say hi.
I don't know if you guys know this face. All right, the lady who raises tiny dinosaurs, known as chickens. All right, this is Jen. I know a lot of you know Jen from after school programs and stuff like this. And so Jen and I are working really, really hard every day, as well as some of our other staff on a part-time basis and some amazing volunteers to make sure all the animals are healthy and well and to deliver our programs for our communities, both locally and in our neighboring states. So we're going to take about the next, I don't know, maybe 40, 45 minutes. This will probably go a little bit faster than it normally does when we're there live and in person with you. Because typically when we're doing that, or if we're doing a virtual session here, like let's say we were doing a Zoom session or a Google Meets or something where you could chat with us, we'd be able to take the time to answer questions and have some interaction with the audience. But this is pre-recorded. We're going to try to do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't just seem like you're watching your standard TV show or something like this, right? These are faces that live right here in your local community. You know that you've seen us, and hopefully this will be a nice quick presentation where we introduce you to 6 of our ambassador animals. So I think Jen's going to run off screen a little bit. She's going to go get our first beautiful ambassador animal to share with you. And what I want to do is kind of set the groundwork here. So all of those different species that we work with, they all live in wildlife communities. Certainly their communities are not set up like a human community, but there are interactions, there are relationships. In fact, as we evolve as an organization into an ecology center and farm school, a lot of people ask us, what does ecology mean? It sounds all, nature-y and tree hugger or whatever, nature lover. Well, ecology is actually a field of scientific study. It is the study of living things. And that's not just animals. That's plants and funguses and bacteria and so on, and obviously influenced by non-living or partial living things. Non-living things being like water, soil, rocks. Partial living things, we're all dealing with it right now, viruses. They're not really alive, they're kind of alive, they're one of those weird things. So ecology is the study of all of these things, living and non-living, and how they interact in their natural communities. As we look around the world, we see lots of different types of communities, different types of habitats, deserts, rainforests, grasslands, ocean, and these are called biomes. So our first animal that's going to come on screen here is a rainforest species. And maybe some of you have met her before. She is actually, believe it or not, even though she's a rainforest species, she's a longtime resident of Rochester, New Hampshire. This is Sophie. And Jen is holding Sophie because Sophie is the most intelligent animal that is participating in our presentation today. Except for Jen. Sorry, Jen. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. Jen counts, all right? But Sophie is incredibly smart. Not only is she intelligent, and if I were to compare it to a person like us, I would say maybe she's in some ways about as smart as a 3 or a 4-year-old person, okay? They can remember things incredibly well. They can recognize individuals and remember past experiences. And, you know, they even have, believe it or not, they even have the capacity to have emotions, to create bonds. Yes, you do. To create bonds. And sometimes, like this time of year, for a number of reasons, they get hormonal. Now, probably some of you are old enough that you know what that means, or at least what hormones are. Hormones are a method of communication within a community. But it would be community of a single organism, like this animal here. This animal is a community, if you will. It's a whole bunch of living cells that make up the bird, the feathers, the beak, the internal organs, the skeleton, all these different cells. But then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's like not her. Inside her digestive tract, same as with us, a lot of you guys already know this, there are a whole bunch of microbes. Did you just poop in the studio?
Oops.
Animals. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of microbes and bacteria, different kingdoms of life than animals, and they're actually living on her, in her mouth. That's right,
Yes.
You've got a dirty mouth, though it's a good dirty mouth, but not all bacteria are bad. And even inside her stomach, which as an animal that primarily eats plants, is really essential, because if you remember back to some of your studies on the food cycle, no animal can digest plant matter effectively. And I don't think we're going to get into the science details of that, but just know that for any animal that eats plants, having a community and a working relationship with things that are too small for our eyes to see but count just as much as the big things, the bacteria and the microbes, critically important. There are a whole bunch of things all over her as well that you can't see, and they contribute to the health of her feathers and so on. One of the things that we often share with people with this type of bird called a blue and gold, or some people call it blue and yellow macaw, is the fact that these feathers, they're so nice and soft. She's hormonal right now. She doesn't really want me to touch her because she might decide, hey, you touched me, personal space, keep your 6 feet of distance. And of course, she's fully armed there. You guys see that right there, right? That beak it can be used as both an offensive or a defensive tool or weapon. So I'm going to be mindful of that with her. But her feathers are so soft. And macaws, Amazon parrots, cockatoos, and other animals that are known as hook-billed birds or scientifically psittacine birds, they generally produce some sort of dander. Kind of think of it like having dander, but in a good way, or a wing or feathered dust. It helps to do many things for them, keeping their feathers soft, keeping their outer feathers dry, making it an unhappy environment for things like bugs and mites to live in there and kind of like populate her. So it makes it a desirable place for her, an undesirable place for other things. And that dust is really important. Okay, and there she is being hormonal. Now, for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
That's
okay?
birds.
Do you want to put her down on the table?
Yeah.
Or give her a little, well, if we give her a snack now, then that's going to be a positive reward.
You don't want
So
to
Sophie's going to stand down on the table.
I'm going to stand back so you
There
can
we
see
go.
her.
Sophie, what are you doing back there, young lady? She's literally like a pterodactyl. Now, unpredictable. You guys just saw that happen, right? There was absolutely no warning. This is the nature of wild animals in particular, and especially the nature of incredibly intelligent ones like birds. And that's one reason, along with the dust, that's actually two reasons why we strongly discourage having animals like this as a part of your home community. I was just the other day recounting the story of a bird that used to live in somebody's house, and that dust that I talked about that their feathers naturally make, that dust was actually inhaled by people in the house, and it created a life-threatening situation. I have somebody that I knew in my life that I considered a friend that is no longer alive because they spent too much time around birds, and that wing dust, that feather dust, accumulated in their lungs. Okay? The other thing is, of course, they are highly unpredictable, very emotional, and so on. Sophie has a great relationship with Jen, but you just saw, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, Sophie decided to bite her hand. And we don't know, how are you, by the way? Are you bleeding?
Oh, I'm fine.
Just a little pinch? Oh, she's bleeding a little bit.
Oh,
Yeah, so,
I'm
yeah, here, let me
fine.
get her a paper towel. We'll do a little first aid. This is a regular thing for us. I'm half tempted to have her show you the bloody hand, but I know that there are probably people out there that are like, oh, the sight of blood makes me throw up in my mouth or something like that. So we're not going to put you through that. But that is the reality. So birds in their natural community, critically important. For example, if they were to eat something that were brightly colored like this is a little slice of apple, okay? And if you guys don't know, apple is a type of fruit. Many fruits are sweet and some are not, all right? So apples, grapes, berries, bananas, those are all types of fruits. Other types of fruits that aren't sweet are things like avocados, squash, cucumbers, things like that, are all different types of non-sweet fruits. But either way, the purpose of the fruit is to carry the seed or the baby plant, hopefully have it be consumed by an animal, and if it's a small enough seed, it'll swallow it whole. And then with the case of a bird, it will fly off into the sky, especially if it's kind of like startled by a predator. And then it will carry and disperse that seed someplace else, wherever it happens to go to the bathroom, all right? So fruits are something that animals are attracted to. The bright color, when they are ripe, the sweet taste of the fructose, which many animals, not this bird, but many animals can actually smell the fructose. There's something in there you're going to want. And so the fruits are designed to be eaten. Now, the other option is this one here. This is obviously not a fruit. This is a nut. All right, a nut is just a variant of seed. It is the embryo of a plant. And of course, the plant, the parent plant, if you will, would ideally like to see its offspring, the embryo, be somewhere on the ground where it can put in its roots into the soil, absorb a whole bunch of stuff from the soil, moisture and nutrients, grow its shoots, photosynthesis, capture energy from the sun, and live and develop its body. But with an animal like that, with that type of beak, and she can actually close it. I don't know if she used it all with Jen, but she can actually full force about 300 pounds of pressure. Now, an adult can bite with the back of their mouth about 200 pounds of pressure. So I think we would all agree if somebody stuck their finger inside my mouth and I bit as hard as I could, that would definitely hurt. But the teeth in the back of our mouths, they're flat, but they're kind of bumpy, right? Those grinding molars and so on. When I'm talking about 300 pounds, can you see if she'll come over and step up on that?
Absolutely.
So that we can see her a little bit closer?
Good girl.
Okay.
Good job.
Now, don't be naughty. Do you want to try to give that to her? Would you like this?
Do you want that?
Do you want this? Sophie's not in the mood to do a demonstration. But look at how sharp that beak is. You can come really close. There we go. That beak, 300 pounds, focused under that point, is incredible pressure. All right? So it would easily be able to crack open a nut like this, take advantage of one of the weak spots there, and then, are you changing your mind? Do you want it now?
Do you want it?
No?
No?
Okay? Not going to cooperate. Hormonal birds. Okay? And so then, unfortunately, the plant embryo, the nut that's inside, again, just this large version of a seed, is too big for her to swallow whole. It can't stay intact and pass through the digestive tract, out the other side, and then roots and shoots in the ground and live. So unfortunately, a bird like this with a large nut will actually break it apart into pieces, which unfortunately is going to mean that this animal, yeah, I'm going to break it into pieces.
Yes.
That's right. I'm going to eat it up. I'm going to grind it into tiny little pieces. And so unfortunately, this one wouldn't survive. So one reason that plants reproduce in such massively large numbers is because they know that there are predators, and not all of them are beneficial predators spreading and dispersing the seeds. So that's a little bit of how within the natural community, with some types of plants that produce small fruits and small seeds, an animal like this is a beneficial helper to the wildlife community. And with something that produces larger things like walnuts, Brazil nuts, almonds, and stuff like that, these animals would actually be considered predators in a harmful way. So that is Sophie, the blue and yellow macaw. We are going to say goodbye to Sophie.
Hi, Sophie.
And while she's gone and we're coming out with the next animal, I'll tell you just a little bit about her Rochester community story. So Sophie is about 30 years old. And she lived for about 25 years here in Rochester, New Hampshire, with a man and a woman. I do not encourage this at all. In fact, I think her story is a great story that we can learn from, because you got to understand that this man and this woman cared for her despite the bites, despite the pooping on the floor, which we still have to clean up. You know, despite all of this stuff, they're incredibly loud birds, incredibly needy, emotionally birds, cared for them for 25 years. Literally, like the husband got the bird for the wife. It was actually a present, and we are very much against live animals being gifted as presents because it's such a huge responsibility. And what ended up happening was they were a responsible couple, and they cared for her for 25 years. And unfortunately, the husband passed away. He wasn't alive anymore. The wife was taking care of Sophie by herself, and then her health was failing, and she needed help taking care of herself. So she had to go live somewhere where the bird was not allowed to come with her. And that's basically a long story short on why Sophie is with us at the Wildlife Encounters Ecology Center. At 30 years old, many of you probably already know this, but that she's maybe halfway through her life. A macaw like that easily has a 50 to 60 year lifespan or more. So she will be with us and in our care and spoiled rotten. We absolutely love her, despite the bites and the blood loss. It's just a part of working with animals, and it is an important thing for us to share when we do get bit, that it's never the animal's fault. It's kind of always our fault, or it's just something that happens. So our next animal coming up, okay, is going to be an animal that would kind of live in, do you have it? Her? Athena? Okay. Will be a part of that South American community as well. Okay, so macaws are Amazon rainforest species, or South American rainforest species, and they are animals that would occupy the forest canopy up above, up high in the sky. And they would honestly only rarely come down to the ground to enter, well, this animal's neighborhood. Okay, so within a community, there are lots of neighborhoods, right? And so the neighborhood for the birds is the rainforest canopy, and then the neighborhood for this animal is the rainforest floor. So let me move over here and share with you this one. Okay, now taking a close look at it, it kind of looks scaly. Can you put it even closer?
Absolutely.
So we can really see? It looks really scaly. But then you see these hairs. And you're like, wait a minute. So it's either fish or reptiles that are scaly generally, but neither fish or reptiles have hair. And this kind of looks like a rock. It kind of looks like a non-living thing, but we wouldn't be sharing it with you if it were a non-living thing. If we ever do a Wildlife Encounters program with just a rock, please just let us know. That one was no good. Please don't ever do that again. Okay? So I'm sure a lot of you probably know what this is. It is a very unique, kind of a scaly mammal. I know that the pangolins of Asia are in popular media, social media, Facebook memes, and everything else, Instagram. They say the pangolin is the scaly mammal, but I would argue that the New World, which is either North or South America, also has its own version of that old world scaly mammal, and they are called armadillos. Now there are lots of different types, 21 in fact different types of armadillos. From the tiny little cute fairy armadillo, it only gets like 4 inches long and it's kind of pink, to, well, the biggest one weighs over 100 pounds and it's very dark color. It's called the giant armadillo. And then there's the really hairy armadillo. There's a scary, screaming hairy armadillo. And the armadillo that actually lives in North America, down like around Disney World, Florida, all the way over to Texas and so on, that's called the 9-banded armadillo. Now, if you could turn her around, I want to share with them where this banded name comes from. I know, she's starting to wake up. She's like, okay, so armadillos, actually turn her back around again. Armadillos all have a plate over their head, and this is her head right here. And then they have an armor plate over their shoulders, and another one, they have a hard, it's almost like a bony, scaly tail, and a plate over their back, but in the, or lower, like lumbar and bottom area and so on. But then now turning her around, you'll notice that she has these weird bands. Okay, so here's the armor plate on top, and then there's 1, 2, 3 bands, and these lighter areas are flexible skin. Okay, now there are a couple of other types of armadillos that have bands, but they don't have quite as much flexible skin. All right, for example, the one down in Florida and Texas is called the 9-banded armadillo. It's much bigger than this one that you're seeing here. The 3-banded armadillo has so much flexible skin there that it's actually the only kind of armadillo that can do what she's doing right now, which is completely, whether it's sleeping or being scared or something like that, able to curl up into a ball. Do you think if you put her back here there on the table, she might actually kind of open up and walk around? Let's see if she'll do this. Okay. So this may or may not work. We'll see. Because armadillos are generally nocturnal. They are animals that are naturally very sedentary during the day. Not that they can't be woken up, not that they can't be awake for a little while during the day, but it's pretty unusual for an armadillo to really kind of be like up and running throughout the day. And I thought she was going to wake up.
I thought so too.
If you just touch her a little bit around. No.
She was going to wake up.
What if she's on your hand?
Can try.
Maybe. And now she's all curling up. She's like, I thought that there were kids out here to see. But I peeked out just a little bit while you guys were talking about my bands, and I realized there's not an audience, so I'm just going to go back to sleep. Okay? Now, when they are awake, they are moving around an awful lot, and they are digging up tons and tons of bugs. Kind of like a skunk that lives in our backyard. It's actually really beneficial. It might annoy people to have a skunk or where they live, an armadillo kind of digging small holes in the lawn, but it's actually really beneficial because not only are they getting in there and they're helping to control the bug and invertebrate population by literally eating some of the bugs, but at the same time, where they're kind of like digging into the grass and separating the roots, it's giving more of an opportunity. It's called aerating the ground. And it allows an opportunity for literally oxygen to get into the soil, down into the ground, and other things in the atmosphere, as well as moisture, water. Ooh, she's starting to wake up just a little bit.
Yes.
Well, then she's in the light.
No light.
We'll put her in the light.
No light.
Okay, look at that nose.
Look
at that little wiggly nose. That nose is how she finds her food primarily. Okay, if you hold her a little higher and then maybe tip her down, maybe she's more inclined to open up a little bit. And you can just see here, right where I'm pointing right there, you see one of her toenails right in there, all right? And those toenails, and I think there's one on the other side. Can you turn her this way a little bit? No, other way. Yeah, then you see that toenail right there, all right? Those are what are made, almost like little gardening shovels. They're made to kind of dig apart and tear apart the soil a little bit and allow her to get bugs. And then the little hole that she leaves behind, that little separation, is a place for water, moisture, and air to get down in. Now, not a lot of people understand this, okay? But believe it or not, about 1/3 of all, look at her, she's like, I might come out, I might not. She's being a tease today.
Athena.
So about 1/3 of all animal life that lives on land, on planet Earth, lives in the 12 to 18 inches of soil, top organic soil, underneath our feet. 1/3 of all biomass, all life on Earth. And they are mostly invertebrates. Now you can see her eyes. She has such tiny little squinty little eyes. Okay? They have very, very poor eyesight. They do not rely on seeing very much to make their way around in their natural environment. They can hear quite well, They can smell incredibly well. And yes, even though she looks like a rock, she can feel the slightest touch, especially these little hairs. These little hairs are like trigger hairs. They're like super sensitive whiskers that actually come out from the soft underbelly parts of her. And if something's going to try to get in there past her shell to harm her, something touches those hairs, that triggers the animal to fold up and close. And you can imagine if you got your finger stuck in there, clamped shut, it'd probably feel like having your finger shut in a door. It would definitely not be pleasant. So these animals are just absolutely incredible, crazy animals. Again, armadillos are all American animals. Only one of them lives in North America. The rest of them live in South America. Sadly, some of them are endangered species. Hey, young lady. Okay. But the three-banded armadillo, thankfully, the three-banded armadillos are not an endangered species. They're quite plentiful in their natural environment, and we're very, very thankful for that. Yes, the wildfires that were happening in the South American region certainly did affect them, but a lot of them take refuge by, as many animals do, going down into holes and burrows. Remember, the fire is really only going to affect the organic matter at the top. Dry grasses, trees, leaves, branches in the ground and stuff like that. And so if this animal goes in underneath in a tunnel underground, then the fire will literally, and this is how many, many animals survive a wildfire naturally, because wildfires are very, very natural. I mean, for all of time that there have been thunderstorms and lightning strikes, the lightning strikes the ground, it starts a forest fire, it burns a certain area, and actually that burning process gets rid of a lot of the old, no longer living plant matter, and allows the energy within it either to escape or to be consolidated and put back into the ground. Burning is actually really, really healthy for the planet. I know it's scary for us to think about. It almost doesn't seem to make sense when I say burning is a healthy thing, but I got to tell you, when I was a kid growing up on a farm in Maine, one of my jobs was to help burn the grass in our pastures every single year. We would take an area of our pasture and say, this gets burned this year, and we'd literally start a fire in the field. We'd have the hoses and the buckets of water and everything out there, and we would control it so it didn't get off into the woods or anything. And every single time we did that, let me tell you, the grass that grew back, it came back brighter, more healthy, more vibrant, more nutritious for the cows that were grazing and so on. So these animals, as well as their food, the bugs, hide safely underground from the wildfires. All right, so thank you very much, Athena, for coming out just a little bit. Now we're going to move on to something that's honestly kind of like something that they would eat. And I think I'll maybe give Jen a break on this. I'm just going to come over here. Now, all of the animals are in the farmhouse here with us. Not all of the animals that we care for, but just the 6 that we brought here today. Okay? And so we are just going to see these 6. This one here is an invertebrate. A lot of times when we share these animals with people are like, that's not an animal. It counts. It's very important. Animal number 3 of the 6 in our presentation is an animal that represents a vast number of different animals on the planet. They are called invertebrates. And invertebrates actually make up about 98% of all of the different animal species on the planet. By invertebrate, you probably remember this from elementary school. An invertebrate is an animal that doesn't have a backbone. Of course, the backbone is a series of bones, also called the spinal column or spine, that would run down the middle of an animal, and it would protect the spinal cord. Kind of think of that like a huge electrical cord or a bunch of smaller electrical cords all bunched together that connect the brain, the supercomputer of an animal, to the rest of its body. And it's important to protect not only the brain with a skull, but also the spinal column. Now, in effect, what that means, not technically, but by kind of like following the logical conclusion, is that most invertebrates, like a tarantula, don't really have a brain. Sometimes I make kids really scratch their heads. They'll be like, all right, did you guys know that like over 95% of all the different types of animals on the planet don't even have brains? And they're like, what? It's crazy to think of. But yeah, they're invertebrates. And so tarantulas are within a specific group of invertebrates that we call arachnids. If you don't know what an arachnid is, by definition, scientifically, and from a grouping standpoint, it's going to be an invertebrate animal, an animal without a backbone, an invertebrate animal that has, anybody? I know some of you are shouting it out right now watching it. An arachnid is an animal that has 8 legs. And so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 on this side, and then 4 on the other side. So we would call that 4 pair, partnered up, 2, 4, 6, 8, total of 8. And then there are the little ones in the front. You see those little ones right there. Now those are not technically legs. Those are not really arms, but sometimes used that way. The technical name for that particular part of an arachnid's body, they're called pedipalps. And on different arachnids, they take different forms. Like, for example, if you are familiar with a scorpion, scorpions have those pinchers, right? Think of it like itty-bitty little lobster claws, okay? Actually, lobster claws are the pedipalps on those animals. And so different ones take different forms. Now, at the bottoms of all of these feet, I don't know if we'll be able to get close enough to really see. Nah, it's kind of fuzzy, at least on my end of things, seeing the camera. But they have tiny little grabbing capability on the bottoms of their feet. Kind of think of it like tiny little pinchers, like lobster claws, only really, really tiny on the bottoms of their feet. That's why this animal can literally cling onto this towel and not slide and fall. Good thing, because if it landed on the table below here or on the hard floor, then its exoskeleton, remember it doesn't have any bones, an endoskeleton, its exoskeleton is made of something called, well, I've heard it pronounced 2 ways, either chitin or chitin, okay? And so its exoskeleton is not that strong. Invertebrates tend to be quite fragile animals many times, all right? But it is what allows them to have shape, and actually how they move, when they move their legs and stuff like that right there, that is actually by moving fluids, all right? No muscles, because muscles connect to bones. So this is not a muscle contracting to move the limb. This is actually the movement of fluids, okay? Any of you guys who want to grow up to be like engineers or work in the trades or something like that, you might be familiar with how hydraulics work, right? So something like a backhoe or a tractor with a bucket or something like that normally uses hydraulics. Hydro meaning water or fluid. And so this is the use of fluids to change pressure in order to move parts of a tractor or a backhoe, or in the case of an invertebrate, how to move their legs. Now, what stimulates them to move their legs? Look at how hairy they are. It's crazy. And those hairs, just like the hairs on the armadillo, are super sensitive. They're like tiny little super sensitive whiskers. Now, the ones on the back here, just to go over the anatomy and physiology real quick, we have 8 legs. We have the pedipalps in the front. All of those 10 appendages, as well as this big bubbly thing on the back we'll get to, all connect to this central part, which on an invertebrate, an arachnid rather, is called a cephalothorax. Cephalo means head, thorax means chest, so it's the head and the chest all in one piece. And actually, if you look really close, right toward the front right there, you'll see a little bump up. That is actually the eye stalk. All right, so depending on the type of tarantula, they can have anywhere from a couple to several dozen eyes. And depending on the type of tarantula, those eyes may be advanced enough to actually see things at a distance and be able to like view objects that are far away. Or like this tarantula, they're pretty simple eyes. In fact, they're only what we call photoreceptive organs, which means they are able to detect the presence or lack of presence of light in different light radiation spectrums. All right, so this tarantula has no idea that it's like inches from my face. All right, it can't see me. All right, and I'm holding it beside my face because that further disguises my location. If I held it in front of my mouth, then as I am speaking, the air would come out of my mouth and it would go across this tarantula's body, and the breeze would let it know where I am. Now, if it thought that I was a predator, and when I use thought, I use that word very simply, right? Doesn't have a brain where it processes thoughts like we do. But if, from an instinctive perspective, it thought that it was in danger, remember those little pinchers on the bottoms of the feet? Well, what it could do is take those little pinchers that are on the bottom of the feet and pick one of these feet and actually reach back and pull the tiny little hairs off this big bubbly part, which we haven't identified yet, but technically it is its abdomen. And these little black things on the back that are kind of all folded up right now, those are called the spinnerets, right there on the back. Those are actually what the tarantula uses to make its tarantula silk, spider silk, okay? So, oh, easy. Hang on. There we go. Oh, okay. Oh, it's getting crazy. Okay. Whoa. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So, if it really felt threatened, it could actually pull the hairs out of its abdomen and throw them backwards toward my face. And to tell you the truth, that would be really irritating, because those little hairs, think of them like tiny little porcupine quills, like tiny little darts. And if they get in soft tissues like your eyes, your nose, or inside your mouth, very irritating, very, very itchy. In fact, not too long ago, they actually, I don't know if you guys have ever been into one of those gift shops or something like that where you can get like gags and gifts for presents, like your friend's birthday, or what do I get my uncle for Christmas? Get him something like when he sits on it, it makes a farting sound, like whoopee cushion, something like that. And those types of shops will carry itching powder, okay? And it's a powder that, like, if you get it on you, it's itchy. And old school itching powder, I don't know what's in it now, but I know in the old school itching powder, they would actually put tarantula hairs. Like that was the ingredient to make itching powder, which is really kind of crazy. I don't know who shaves tarantulas, like whose job is that, but they actually would use that. So tarantulas have their own special defense mechanisms. They are a part of the wildlife community. They help to maintain a balance because they are venomous, so they are predators of other animals. Little cricket or a beetle comes along, grabs it with a pedipalps, pulls it underneath. It has two little fangs. It doesn't really have a mouth. Its jaw is actually shaped more like a straw, but so it can't really bite. Anytime you hear somebody say, "Oh, I got bit by a spider," no. You got injected with venom from a spider with its fangs, maybe, but spiders don't actually have the ability to bite. They don't have a jaw. All right. So, where was I going with that? Oh, so it catches the beetle. It uses the venom to overpower and kill the beetle, and so on, in order to get its food. At the same time, obviously, it is food for things higher on the web of life. They are not a communal species. They don't have each other's back. They don't watch out for each other. They don't live in family groups. They don't get together, moms and dads. In fact, with many species of tarantulas and other invertebrates, if there's a relationship where, for the purposes of reproduction, a dude and a lady get together, then after that part's done, but before the babies are born, the female often eats the male, which I'm not a big fan of sharing that because it makes me feel very uncomfortable, but thankfully that doesn't happen very often with people. All right, let's move on to our next one. Actually, I'm, you know what, full disclosure, just in case anybody out there is like, what? It's happened? I don't know of a single case, but never say never, right? People have been around a long time, not always quite as civilized of a society as we have today. And I know you look around and you're like, yeah, today's not a lot to speak of. Crazy things happening out there. But we can be civilized. It's a personal choice. Who's next? You want to get in on this? Mm-hmm. All right. So our next animal is one of my favorite animals to share on a Zoom program or a recorded program, because you get to see and experience this animal in a very different way. Actually, I want to do the magic part. If you could hand him to me.
Okay.
Ah, that's cool. So here's what we're going to do. It's not really magic, but what we are going to do is we're going to do something magical. We are going to imagine. We are going to transport ourselves using our imagination into this animal's habitat. We are no longer in our bedroom, office, studio, living room, or wherever you're watching this program for Community Day. We are now imagining that we are sitting in the swamps of Florida, maybe Alabama, Mississippi, someplace down south. Okay? It's a beautiful sunny day. You're like, I'm kind of hot. I'm throwing on my swimming suit. I'm going to jump in the pond, and I'm going to sit in just kind of like chest deep water. Okay? And you jump in, you're sitting there in kind of like maybe a rocky area. Maybe you sit on a rock, right? So you're not like in the mud or in the weeds or something like that. So you're sitting on some sort of a rock, and all of a sudden, that rock moves. You're like, what in the world? It just moved. And suddenly, a head comes up out of the water. And you're like, what in the world is that? It almost at first looks like just a stick coming up out of the water. And then you notice it has two holes. And then it has eyes. And then, oh my gosh, I sat on a giant snapping turtle. Now, down south, they do not have the types of snapping turtles with super long necks that we have around here. They have the bigger cousin. Yeah, bigger than our snapping turtles around here, and not by a little, by a huge amount. Down south, they have the alligator snapping turtles, okay? Now, this one looks huge because he's pretty close to the camera, but let me give you some perspective. Yeah, he's not that big, right? He's just a little guy. And why did you sit on him thinking he was a rock? Well, look at that. Honestly, it just kind of looks like a bumpy rock. The uniform pattern is a little bit strange. It might be a clue that it's not some sort of non-living thing, okay? Every single one of these bumps, we call these scutes. It's just a special anatomy name for them, okay? And what they are technically is they represent underneath each of the bones. So I don't even care if it's the snapping turtle that lives around here, the alligator snapping turtle, some sort of tortoise somewhere, box turtle, whatever it happens to be. Any turtle or tortoise on planet Earth, they have a big, broad shell on top. Now, not always hard. To tell you the truth, there are some soft-shelled turtles, even some that live right here in America, and they're pretty cool, okay? But most turtles and tortoises have hard shells, and the shell, technically the top part called the carapace, is actually 13 of its skeletal bones. These are its 5 backbone vertebrae, and beside them on each side are 4 ribs. So 5 plus 4 plus 4, 13. Every single turtle and tortoise on the planet, its top shell or carapace is comprised of primarily 13 bones covered by the same stuff as your fingernails, only pretty cool different patterns and shapes. Okay, for those who have ever seen a tortoise and you notice that it has patterns and shapes or circles on it, I will caution you that these are tortoises, not trees, or turtles, not trees. And so you cannot tell how old they are by counting the rings like you can our trees here in New Hampshire's forests. Okay? Now, all turtles and tortoises have that big shell on top, but snapping turtles are different because they don't have much of one on the bottom. Okay? They have lots of exposed area here, soft tissue. And so if a snapping turtle fully pulls itself up out of the water and actually walks out on land, the greatest danger from attackers is something actually flipping it upside down on its back, okay? You probably know that turtles, when they get on their back, well, as my dad would say, kind of up the creek without a paddle, right? Have you ever heard that saying, or am I showing how old I am? Anyway, okay, in a lot of trouble. You're kind of stuck with snapping turtles, since they have a unique bottom shell or plastron, and they honestly can't protect themselves by just kind of like tucking in their head, tucking in their arms, and just hiding in their shell for safety like other turtles and tortoises do, or even the armadillo's self-defense mechanism. These animals have a special capability. Do you want to show them?
Absolutely.
Have you done this before?
I have.
Okay. This is something that I showed Jen, and she's starting to do it with her audiences, so I'm going to hand the snapping turtle over to Jen, and Jen is going to walk behind me to our presentation table. What she's going to do, oh, look at how tiny he is.
Aww.
The further he gets away, you're like, oh, he's such a little turtle now. He looks huge up near the camera, right? Well, believe it or not, I have actually worked with one of those that weighed more than Jen. Yeah. Yeah, no, Jen doesn't weigh that much.
Not that I weigh that much.
Not that you weigh that much, no. But I weighed more than Jen, and it was 2 feet longer than this entire table. All right, so this guy's walking around on the ground. He's out of the water. All of a sudden, something comes along and flips him upside down on his back. And he says, I don't like the feeling of that. And he uses his long and strong neck and his nose as a point of pivot to turn him upside down. He got a head start on you that time, though. He was like, Jen, you're not doing it to me. Do it over here on the slippery side. Okay?
Ready?
Yeah. Flip him. Yep, upside down. And
Oh,
boom. Look at
did
that.
it again.
So, you know what, that's a really cool, what we call adaptation, or that's a combination of adaptations, right? When we learn about adaptations in science classes and so on, we understand that there are 3 basic categories of adaptations. There are the physical things that we can see, all right? And those take a long time to adapt about animals. Like, look at that long tail. Oh my goodness. That's one of the signs that you're seeing a snapping turtle, by the way. Even the ones around here, if you see a turtle walking around on the ground sometime and it's got a giant long tail hanging out behind it, then it's going to be a snapping turtle. You can tell from a safe distance, okay? So these are all different physical adaptations, okay? Then there are behavioral adaptations. What does the animal do? So, for example, it has the physical adaptation of a long, flexible neck, and then it has the behavioral adaptation of using its neck to flip itself back over. And then, of course, there are dietary adaptations. every animal on the planet is what we call heterotrophic. Plants are autotrophic, which means they can take ingredients from the natural environment and make their own food using the chlorophyll chemicals in their body and the process of photosynthesis. This should be review for most of you, okay? But animals can't do photosynthesis. And so they have to eat life to live, if that makes sense, in part or in whole. And so this guy here, what is he adapted to eat? Well, things that live in the water with him. If Jen comes nice and close, you'll see he's got his mouth open, and the alligator snapping turtle is one of the few animals that goes fishing for its dinner. And right in the bottom of his mouth, right in there, you see that little, I don't think so, buddy, that little wiggly little part right there. It actually, in the water, it will stretch out and it will float around, and it looks like a little worm wiggling. And of course, his mouth just looks like a cave, and in our imagination, we already mistook him for a giant rock that we could sit on. So he doesn't even look like a living thing. A fish or a frog comes along, sees a worm floating in the water, swims into the cave to eat the worm, and man, that trap was set, and that trap snaps shut, and that is how they get their meal. These guys can live to be 200 years old or older. They can have a bite strength of over 1,000 pounds. And as I said, I have worked with one that weighed about 240 pounds, and from nose to the tip of the long tail was about 7 feet long. One of the most amazing, coolest, dinosaur-looking like animals native to, I think, our entire world. And it's an American animal that lives right here in North America. So we can go ahead and put him back. We are wrapping things up here. We are about 3/4 of the way through our standard allotted time, and we've kind of only got a couple of animals left. Now, the Community Day thing that we do is for you, right? And we appreciate the support of our community as well in hiring our Wildlife Encounters programs and coming up to our facility on a scheduled backstage pass tour, on basically just letting your friends and your family know what we do with our non-releasable ambassador animals in the way of connecting you to nature and human nature. So we would really not be doing a really good job, though, if we didn't represent our own native species. Obviously, our friends here in New Hampshire, like the guys down at the ocean at the SYC Science Center, the guys up in the mountains at the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center, they mostly focus on like New Hampshire native stuff. With Wildlife Encounters, we have a very global perspective. We're one of those wacky organizations that also thinks that exotics are important to know about too. Because we don't just affect our local community. The shirts you wear, the phones you use, the things that you eat are brought to America, are brought to New Hampshire from places all around the country and all around the world. And so our choices, our consumption as people in our communities, especially if we're in COVID lockdown, we're remote schooling, we're not allowed to go places, we're trying to stay safe, we're trying to support our community and keep our loved ones healthy and ourselves healthy, but at the same time, we're totally dependent. We are totally 100% dependent on others providing us what we need. That can be a little scary. But our choices and what we need and what are brought to us have wide-ranging impacts around the world. So that's one reason why we think it's very, very important to teach and connect kids and adults with global wildlife and global habitats and global communities, and how our choices, we'll save this for another day, how our choices have significant impacts on not only ourselves, our community's health, our personal health, but also the health of the environment, sometimes on the other side of the planet. But in order to really be doing a good job, and I think in order for people to truly support us, as we're so thankful that they are, we've got to also be able to bring it home. So our last two animals for you are native species. Can we see Shadow?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so our next animal coming out, our next to the last animal coming out, is one of my favorites. In fact, I might kind of stand up with Jen, maybe have one of us at each end of the table, and we're going to introduce you to one of my favorite animals. Yes, you heard me ask for him. His name is Shadow. Let's see if he'll come out here. You want to lift his car seat right up there and open the door, and we'll see if he'll walk out for us?
I do.
All right, young man, you ready? It's your turn. He's been waiting so patiently.
He has
Come
been
on, young
patient.
man. Good job. Come on,
Okay.
right here. Good job, young man. Now, for those of you who don't know, hey, over here. Good job. It's right there. This is Shadow, and if you haven't met him, Okay? He is one of several animals that we work with that are native to this area. They live in our backyards. They're what I've called for years one of our neighbors in nature, and he is a gray fox. Now the gray fox, if you're in a well-lit area like we are right now, is relatively easy to identify. It does cohabitate in our backyards with another fox called the red fox. And as you can clearly see from shadow, he has both red and grayish colors on his body. Okay? So a gray fox is generally more gray. A red fox is generally more red. Okay? One of the big color differences, though, is the color of the tip of the tail. On a gray fox, are you looking for more? Hold on. Hold on just a second. Thank you. Okay? The gray fox, the tip of the tail is black, and on a red fox, it's the opposite. It's white. All right? And so that's an easy thing. If you just see a fox kind of like running through the woods, maybe it's in your backyard for a second, you see it out the window because you just finished an online class, you look out the window, you see a fox, you're like, oh my gosh, you jump up and you run to the back door because you want to go take a picture of it or something like that. And it, it hears you coming and it should go, ah, I'm out of here, and like jump over the rock wall and get behind the pool house or whatever you got back there. Okay? Because they're incredibly intelligent animals and they're highly adaptable animals, but they should be timid. They should be scared of the presence and the approach of humans. And obviously, we want to do the same thing with wildlife in our backyard that we're generally doing with strangers. We want to keep a safe distance away. I will let you know, when it comes to backyard fur-bearing animals, 6 feet is not enough. All right, you want to keep a nice, long, respectable distance away from them so that they don't feel threatened or anything like that. But if it does run away, again, that's the color. That tip of the tail is the telltale sign as to whether you're seeing a gray fox or a red fox. What are a couple of other differences? Well, the red fox, as a species, is significantly larger. If we had a red fox here, it would actually stand about this tall in comparison to shadow. It would be probably half again longer. In fact, the red fox is the world's largest fox species. I'm just going to get him a few more snacks here from the table. You want to give them to him, Jen?
Sure.
Now, when the gray fox runs out of your backyard, because you kind of startled him off, he may actually seek refuge in a few different places. He could certainly scurry underneath a building or go into a hollow or burrow somewhere. He could just be hiding in the thickness of a bush, even a prickly bush, even like a thorny bush, because he's got such thick fur that he can literally run right through. I bet some of you have seen this, like deer or fox or something. They run across the road and you're riding your bike, you're walking home from school, you're in a car, you see it disappear into the woods, and when you get to the point where they disappeared into the woods, you look and it's like all just, it's like, where did it go? There's no path. It's crazy. It literally just like ran into the bushes. Well, one of the reasons that they can do that is because they are fur-bearing animals. And that thick fur protects them, almost like the scales on a reptile protect them from scratches and pokes and things like that. So they can disappear by diving right into a thicket of bushes or something like that. Or the gray fox can actually climb a tree. All right, like one of those there on the picture right there. No branches down low. They've got short legs, hooked claws, and they can actually scurry. I've read reports 30 to 50 feet straight up a tree before they need branches. Now, obviously, it can't be a slippery tree like an ash tree or a birch tree or something where there's nothing to grab a hold of. It has to be kind of like one of those, well, what we call conifers or evergreen trees in the forests where they're going to have the thick bark. And it'll be almost like rock climbing, right? If you go to a rock climbing gym or something like that, you got all the grips to put your hands and feet on. So that thick bark with the grooves in it is going to provide him what he needs to be able to climb, either to get away and someplace safe in the treetops or higher off the ground, or he could be chasing food like a squirrel or a chipmunk, which are the primary food sources for gray fox in the wild. So that is Shadow. He is our ambassador animal. And if you guys do take a Backstage Pass tour, he is the first of 4 North American mammals that we see in a row at the very start of the tour. We hope you consider coming and seeing Shadow in his home and learning more super cool things about him. But for now, what is he doing? Everybody's asking, what is he doing?
What is he doing?
Does he have an itch? Does he have fleas? No, he's kind of cat-like. Foxes are scientifically grouped as dogs or in the canid family, but they have some cat-like characteristics. And one of them is scent glands around the neck and the chin area. And so what he's doing is he's actually leaving his scent, he's leaving his smell on the table to let whoever comes next know that this is gray fox territory. Okay. All right, and Shadow is then going to destroy
the table.
He's going to destroy the table. Thank you very much, Shadow. All right,
Thank you very
so
much.
our last animal coming up, you can have him just walk right into it if you want to. I will continue with our last animal. Again, another native species. This is a hog-nosed snake. Now, your challenge, your homework, is to find one of these guys looking like this in our backyard, in our natural environment. And good luck, because the hog-nosed snake is a rare and endangered species. Why in the world is it called a hog-nosed snake? Well, look at that snout. Look at that little tip right there. And if I turn him, he is looking right at you right now, but if I turn him this way, look at that. You can see that his nose goes up. Shadow, what are you doing? Shadow, thank you, Shadow. My goodness.
Shadow. Thank you, sir.
Been a time with the animals today, hasn't it? Okay. So that little upturned snout, which is really handy for them to kind of like use it to get underneath things, they will